and I'd like to welcome you to my Rumble podcast. So this is the first podcast I've done here, having a guest on. So I have a very special guest on here, Christian Hershman. He was on my last podcast a couple weeks ago talking about his journey, and so he's on once again. We're going to talk about it. So welcome, Christian.
Thanks. Good to see you, Dale. Always a
Good
pleasure.
Good seeing you. So we're apologies. We're a little late here, getting on here. We scheduled with 10, but just going through some. This is kind of new stuff going on here with Rumble, so we're just kind of figuring all that out. So we'll get that all straightened away. And so, yeah, it's exciting. Lots to talk about, Christian, in the dog training world in the past week. Just seems like there's so much foolishness happening and so much craziness. But before we go into all of that, we're going to touch on a lot of bases there. Guess just looking for, an update. Christian, how things are going with you and say Hildegard. Is there anything you want to talk about there on that end of things? Just kind of interested to get an update there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Things have been going great. I have ambitions to put a business together, but kind of the barometer for me personally is kind of where is Hildegard at? Where are we at is probably the better way to phrase it. And she's doing great. We're in a real touristy area. So yesterday I walked her through the Siesta Key Village. Lots of kids running around and families and ice cream shops. So very active area. Walked her up and down on the sidewalk. Her heel, her everything she's got going is great. I mean, she's really connecting to me. But I'm also aware of that she likes the walks, right? Mm-hmm. That's very rewarding to her. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm aware of that our relationship's improving, has improved tremendously, but I'm equally aware of, because of the method and my insight provided through my training through your program, I still have to, not get too excited, right? It's easy to really start to get really excited about the progress you're making. But the other side of the coin is that we're still working through, food issues, right?
Sure.
So they've, improved tremendously, and I can, reach into her bowl, and she's not going to bite me or growl or fuss. But she still eats too desperately. She eats quickly. It's still not where it needs to be. She's still holding on a little bit to some of these unhealthy kind of urges to protect her food or covet her food unnaturally. So the point is that I think for most of us on this journey with these high drive dogs, it's important to put yourself in check, and to try to kind of make sure that you're not, that you give yourself, you're happy about your success, but you're being realistic about it, and not falling into that trap like it's some kind of human relationship, right? I mean, that's kind of what happens. You start clicking with the dog, and then you start to forget, maybe in a way, a subtle ways, that it is a dog, and that the way they communicate and interact with us is different than a human. So anyhow, to summarize, I mean, she's doing great, and our relationship is strengthening. We've moved on to doing some of the tracking work, which you're helping me with. So we're doing a lot of those exercises, and things are really coming together for Hildegard. I mean, she's completely de-stressed from when you first were introduced to Hildegard and the method. I mean, it's no comparison.
So one of the questions, I guess, when you see the issue about, petting versus connection, do you see that differently now, Christian? How would you kind of explain that in terms of, how things have changed between you and her?
Right. Well, for starters, and I think I mentioned it on our last podcast, Hildegard's not that interested in me petting her, right? She's very interested in my wife petting her, which is interesting. My wife doesn't handle her. They have a great relationship. There's enough kind of respect there, if you will. I'll use that word lightly, but there's enough respect there where, Hildegard will drop toys for her. Hildegard will listen to her to go to her place or whatever. So there's a connection there, but it's not at the level that I have, because I spend more time influencing Hildegard, right? But in terms of petting for me personally, I've I've always questioned what petting's for, right? Is petting for the dog or is it for the person? I think most of the time it's for us. It's for the human. It provides us comfort. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you have to make sure that you're at the right stage with your dog, and especially depending on the dog as an individual. I mean, I go back to the spectrum of control, kind of like petting, forcing petting is a form of control. It's a better form than biting, but it's still not ideal.
Yeah, that's a good segue. Okay, into this whole thing about I put up a lot of confusion about the issue about control, about influence, right? And I talk about a baseline, and that really triggered off a lot of kind of controversy, and still does in dog training world. When people see my videos about how I'm interacting with dogs at that point of the relationship, when I talk about aspects of the right conversation with the dog. Dog understands intent. Intent's a big theme. And would you say again, because again, even I've had the anti-dog trainer. We had a great talk on my podcast, but then it does get into the method because he wants to and I understand that people look at what I'm doing and they have questions about, okay, like this is like really different than say a loose leash method. How can you speak of that based again on you being here in person? Do you think that matters about the in-person stuff to really get dialed in? Like you can watch my videos, but how did that affect you? I guess coming into because that's one of the things I want to talk through, because people really do they look at my videos and then it throws them off because of the optics of what's going on. But how would you kind of explain that being here, actually doing it and going through it? Like how would you look at that?
Sure. Well, first of all, you can't really get a good understanding of it through YouTube or through the videos. It's just too nuanced and too in the moment, which lines up with the dogs, by the way, because it does have to do with kind of the energy in your training facility, which is very low, calm, neutral, maybe. Like no one's worried about the dogs. No one's putting a lot of demands on the dogs until we get into the training. And then the demands through the leash, I feel, are very reasonable. I mean, I have a very powerful breed dog, so I'm not exactly sure how you would communicate with an overly active dog without putting some of this more firm influence over the dog. But it's important when you're working with people with the method to recognize that it's kind of back to this intervention thing. When I walk Hildegard with the method, that's kind of like a training session. We can take little breaks within the method and say, okay, let's go ahead and let you sniff a little bit and let's loose leash walk around a little bit, and she'll stay with me. Very loose leash and all that. So I think it's easy to conflate kind of like loose leash versus Dale's method, but I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is the method is a significant part of the intervention process. But I think that, once you work through some of those relationship problems, I don't think it's impossible for you to walk with a loose leash, or how about this, even off leash with your dog.
Oh yeah, I talk about that transition. Like a lot of times people will cherry pick a certain moment in the process, but it's based on their filter. They're looking through everything. The lens they're looking through is very superficial. I mean, that's the word I keep using.
Right.
So when I kind of narrow it down and say, well, what is the role of influence and control? Especially again, some of the dogs I'm dealing with. The one I always say, I joke, the 1% dogs always seem to find me. But it's that whole thing with filling in that gap. Where that's the problem. I mean, that's why people get blindsided and bad things happen, especially with these dogs that are high drive. Is that they'll it has to be reconciled. Influence and control, they have to come together. The integrity of that in order to, again, when I talk about that baseline issue about how that shifts in real time, like in the moment, will change that focus of the dog immediately. You know what I'm saying? I talk about kinetic. There's a kinetic principle to the system that is very different. I don't make any bones about that. It's a very different system, but that's what makes it unique. People have no idea, and you do because you've been through the course. But the amount of critical thinking that actually went into this system of training, like when I talk about auditing and asking questions and getting
Right.
that point where, because you spent the time, to ask
Yeah.
the questions and go through everything. So I would say, and that's why getting your perspective is good,
Sure.
because speaking to someone who actually went through it. I mean, because you started with Hildegard with a board and train. That's where you started,
Yeah.
and you were gracious enough to actually let me show some of the video. I showed some of the
Sure.
video for you
Yeah,
during them.
absolutely. There's nothing to hide. It's
No,
all
that's
it's
what I mean.
all
Yeah,
it's all open. It's
yeah.
legitimate. It's seeking truth. It's coming
Oh,
from a place of love and respect for the
oh yeah,
dog,
yeah.
right? So there's nothing to hide. There's
No,
nothing
no.
going on here, right?
So yeah. So when you hear these guys going on about like kind about abuse and violence and all that derogatory stuff, what's your take on that? Like being here, like you see, you see the interactions. You went out with
Yeah,
like.
it's really laughable.
Mhm.
Um, I often use kind of working with horses, and the horses will have a bit in their mouth, and the baseline. I mean, these are similar concepts in the sense that the bit is not to abuse the horse. That's
Mhm.
not the point of that tool.
Mhm.
It's to control a powerful, large animal.
Mhm.
Uh, so I feel that the baseline is the same kind of method in a way. It's really trying to communicate with the dog in this case in a very measured, natural way, right? Because it's very dispassionate. See, one of the things about flicking the leash and this kind of Beckman or these different trainers that do this kind of loose leash and then they correct, and even if their timing's perfect,
Mhm.
it's still kind of this, if you think about the act itself, you have to move quickly,
Yeah.
quickly, boom,
Mhm.
and this to me in nature simulates a little bit more, not necessarily in a bad way, but it's a little more aggressive. It's a little more forward moving. It's a little bit more harsh, sloppy, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas the method just it's tight, and like once you're far along with the method, the baseline you become more tuned with the baseline because
Yeah.
essentially the baseline provides, for example, in service dog work, when we were walking down Siesta Key, we like to stop at every street, even if we don't need to crosswalk.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Hildegard, as soon as I stop, she stops. She walks right with me.
Yeah.
But if she pauses for a sit, I don't have to crank or yank or talk.
Mhm.
I'm talking. I mean, it's hard to even explain with words the amount of pressure you have to put on the baseline to
Mhm.
get the dog to sit. She sits. She's still looking around a little bit, taking in her environment. There's no challenge going on.
No.
Um, so to me, it's kind of something that's misunderstood because it's being shown through video, the baseline and this method. Um, but my personal opinion is that it's very reasonable,
Mhm.
and then it lines up naturally because it's dispassionate. It's kind of slow and
Mhm.
consistent. It's not. Listen, the leash flicking method maybe it's quicker. Maybe certain dogs can fall into line quicker with these interceptions after the fact and all this kind of stuff.
Well, some dogs can, some dogs can't. That's the thing. That's the problem. Like I'll start. I have to. There's a starting point. Talk about it. There's the integrity of influence and control to. That's the assessment phase. It's like being dialed into the relationship at the starting point part where again things move forward. And so when that's the point it's making with that putting out that video of that gentleman that when it came on the videos and he had some lots to say, and I went in and say, okay, let's see what's there for what's his foundation. He showed just all loose leash method. Like there's
Right,
nothing. So the point I make is like, well, my question would be, how much control, what level are these dogs holding? Like that's the thing is like, it's like to determine that, it's the foundation, just like your parenting style. It's the foundation that your starting point to assess and to change. And then, yes, absolutely, I'll get to everything moves forward. So I'll get to a loose leash and off leash part of the relationship. But the starting point, right? If your
right,
starting point isn't right, and you start with the whole loose leash method, or you start to tap, yes, a certain level will, and that's why I get into the whole thing with the talk about the relationship itself. Like the individual plays a part, the dog's social need level plays a part, and so when you see perhaps a trainer, I talk about Ivan Belanoff, can get to a really really high level with his dogs that he personally interacts with, even though he's adopted this play-based, learning-based ideology. But the point I make is that trainers aren't dialed into the problems that they're not dialed into in such a way to know that, okay, say 40% or 50% of the people that are coming to me for help, they'll be failing. Like they're adopting that, so it's not going to generate what needs to be generated. The integrity of that's so important because the people themselves have to change, and so they're not going to be, because they don't have the same personality. So you're changing people, and so they can be failing within the framework of response. These trainers, they won't even see it because their focus isn't on depth that way. It's not. I talk about those two core ingredients. They're not brought into a process the way I described. So,
Right.
I'm saying it's not about me that way. A lot of these trainers are a lot of these statements, it's all ego. You see, it's all ego driven on social media. And I'm saying drop the ego, like actually think about other people to say that, okay, if it's really about there's a problem here, what represents a process where you're going to have a predictable, intentional outcome for people. Like it's going to do what it needs to do for the general population, for dogs. Like that's what matters. And so these trainers don't see it because they're blind to it. They're turned over to the stuff. So I break it down and say, hey, here's the, as here's the issue here. So yeah, we get into this thing about why I do things the way I do them. It's because I care. It's because of saying, hey, we have to start here. It's like having that personal conversation with a parent that has an out of control, selfish child. You just don't walk by the parent and bypass the relationship that way and start into all this stuff. You sit down with the parent and you look at the parenting style, say, let's have a discussion here, let's going on. And see, that's the problem here, is that the dog training world is not set up that way. It's all about just this superficial idea. It's all about me, myself, and I. And this is where you're seeing the dog training world is in such a mess. And here's the problem I have. You have all these trainers, because I just started common sense stuff here too. People, like, you have all these trainers coming into my videos trying to slam and slander and use all this language. And I'm like, you would be coming in here in the first place if you had all the answers. You know what I'm saying? Like just think about the dog training world is a mess. So these same people are railing against what I have to say. Yet
they're not clearly laying out a method.
Well, yeah, and they can't even answer
methods all over the place. They just get into operative conditioning and all the offshoots that huge broad term provides, and it just is about responses.
Yes, responses.
That's kind of it.
I tell you, the glue that holds it all together. It's about relationship, right? But it's about influence and control, right? Those two core ingredients. It's like baking a cake. Got to have the flour. So I even did a video on me, in my kitchen with the ingredients. But just trying to keep it basic and say, listen, this is the problem in the dog training world. This is why we're at the place we're at. And so, like I said, the trainers are slamming all over the place, but then they don't even want to look at the problem. So that's why I went on Miracle Canine, and I started having that conversation. These trainers don't want to have, say, these aren't some random things going on here. All these controversies that I profile on my Flipping the Script series, they all point to what I'm saying. And then the question I'm having is, why aren't any of these trainers, they're going through all this stuff, stepping back and saying, using that as an opportunity to ask the questions that they should have asked at the beginning, instead of just taking a hold of this idea and running with it. So, so it's just, I wanted to talk about that. So the whole influence and control, that's why I put up the 6 videos. But you're right, there's so much, like, there's a lot of subtle stuff. Like, you get into the system of training, as you know, to be here in person, I
mean, you have to, you're reading the dog's connection to you. And there's just a lot more to it. Like a lot of things, when you get into sports and different kinds of trades, like you have to kind of do the work, right? I mean, they talk about this 10,000 hours to be an expert. When it comes to something like work handling dogs, you can't really get that through a screen. That those 10,000 hours wouldn't count. You have to work the dog. You have to.
You do it. Absolutely, and some people can do really well online. I mean, some people, but as you know, I mean, you can't. The in-person part of it is so important. I mean, there's things like in person, that in-person dynamic of being right here, with me, or say with you, and that is valuable. Like you can't get that from online. Some people can do online stuff, Christian, as you know, and probably be really good at it based on their personality type. And but most,
sure. The
but most,
dog, the personality type.
Yeah, or if you have a certain level, like where say you have a foundation right now, and then we could have a discussion online, and then you get it because you've been here. You know what I'm saying? It's like I can talk about certain things now to you, and you're like, okay, yeah, I completely understand what you're talking about, Dale.
Yeah, right. That's true.
So that because you have the foundation of that in-person type of training going on. So so again, I just wanted to kind of clear the air a little bit because I know it's so difficult. Because here's the thing I have: the people that have the most problems with what I'm doing, how I'm training, are the trainers themselves and their followers. Is the dog training community, coming in? They've already bought into this idea of things, their idea of things, and so they're looking through everything through a certain lens, a certain bias there, and so they have a hard time shaking loose from it. As you know, I sit down because you've gone with me when you're here on the dog training course. I took you into a couple of situations with dog owners, but as you probably know, it's like you sit down with people that are open-minded, like they're ready for help. How much easier it is, right? Because because when I was there, did I get into all this stuff with the social media stuff with the people I held with? I didn't bring it up. It's just like, but I do talk about aspects of what like parenting, right? Certain things to help them, examples, but it's
and all your videos are public. So the vast majority. So so any client of yours or anybody that I might work with in the future, they can just go right on YouTube or Rumble. And they can look at, in your case, thousands, a ton of videos.
You're right.
Yeah, so there's again, nothing's hidden. The other thing I'd like to say when it comes to the method and specifically with the leash and the baseline is, like, for example, I've been really following Kevin at Anti-Dog Trainer, and you had him on not too long ago. It's a good example of it would make virtually no sense to say, hey, Kevin, go put Goose up on a baseline and kind of, put this demand on Goose for no reason, his dog, right?
That's right, yeah.
It's painfully obvious that he has a seriously deep connection with Goose. Goose is following Kevin, period, the end. So So you don't need to run over to Dale and say, hey, Dale, I need help. Kevin doesn't need help. Kevin's relationship is solid.
But here's the problem, Christian. But here's the problem. That's part of the issue here. I talk about like Ivan Belanoff being the example. There's certain dynamics there where, like, and that's kind of the tricky thing here is like you could have it's like Ivan Belanoff, a dog of high level. But the problem here is that he brings a dog in, and that's why my loose leash kind of example, I put that video up. You don't know. I mean, if you start there if that's not brought into alignment, influence and control the way I described, you don't know. I mean, the thing is, you could have, and then you're not, because the question I had put up on my Facebook page, I put it right up there for everyone to see, is that's really the foundational question. What is the criteria these trainers are using to establish that the perception of these dogs are changing the way they think they are within the framework of response? No trainers can answer that. But that connects, though, to what I'm saying about influence and control being reconciled, coming in the way I described, to provide not just the assessment part of it, but the change part of it. Because if your starting point is with a loose leash or influence and control aren't defined that way, you don't know. But here's the thing. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, his dog could be at a very high level. But that can't be said for all trainers and all dogs, even with himself. Because that's a conversation he wants to have with me, saying, Dale, so that tells me right away, okay, there's, how do you know? Because, and then here's the other problem is then that has to transfer over. Say if you have a board and train situation, that your idea of it, because now as a trainer, right, it's not coming the way I described, that transfers over to the owner because that dog's got to go back to the owner. Right. And then for them, right, and that's the point I'm making. See, these trainers don't even consider certain things. Then for them to generate what has to happen in reverse course, they can be stalled out because based on what that loose leash method or is not coming in the way I described, and then everything washes out. I mean, how common is it for these board and trains to wash out so quickly for people, and people then what? Oh, it must be something wrong with the dog. I can't get that. I can't get the just leave the remote collar on 24/7. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff is all part of it. So, my thing when you get into the actual method side of things is it does matter. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I'm not taking anything away from the fact, like that's what Ivan Belhoff would do the same thing. You have dogs that like all the trophies behind them, these dogs. And I was at the same place with Ruben, but that's an opportunity, right? But how does that play into a trainer being able to actually figure out what the real problem is? And see, that's what it really comes down to, Christian. Is like what all that type of, because I had to kind of reverse engineer everything through Ruben, right? To say, okay, what is this really about? Why are some dog owners successful using the exact same methods and devices and other ones fail, within the same, like that's really the fundamental question here. And is it really the dog's fault? So this goes into this loose leash thing, right? So, because someone like the anti-dog trainer, of course he's going to have a problem, right, with what I'm doing, right? But I put the same, I get into the same thing. Like, how do you know? Because here's the thing: you can take a dog and you can put everything I say to the test anyway. Like you said, there's nothing hidden here. Yeah, I'm saying the what I'm talking about, the core ingredients, influence, and control, how I'm interacting. You can put it to the test and get dialed into it. It's a decision. These trainers, do you want to just, because this is what I'm saying is all the bad stuff happening in the dog training world, Christian. It's no accident or coincidence. Just take all the bad stuff happening and line it all up. Right.
Well, I think it's just because there certain human personality types can get a lot out of their dog with doing very little. Yeah. And then there's dogs that are going to walk all over you. Right. Yeah. And Kevin even mentioned in the past he had situations that he had to confront his dogs, and I assume a very firm way to make it very clear to those dog or dogs, that who was in charge of the household. Yeah. And the baseline and the method is, in my view, is doing that same exact thing, but without the conflict part, right? Without the taking the gloves off and having a bout. This is more about demands and pressure on the dog consistently for a certain period of time, and then the dog kind of lets it go. It kind of gets it. It's kind of like, you're in charge of me.
See, and that's the thing. It's about intent. The dog understands intent, but there's more to this. Like when I get into the method, it's like people have to understand here. It's about what this means. The process means to the owners coming to you for help.
Right.
You understand? Like you really start to get what I'm talking. So it's about caring, right? About other people, right? In terms of what that process needs to be for them. Okay, not for me. Like for me, and you're right. I could use treats to get away with it. Sure. I could. But that's not the point here. See, that's the thing. These dog trainers, they're so ego driven, they can't even stop and consider other people or what's really happening here. They just say, "Hey, I don't know. I got these dogs and they're fantastic. I'm not denying that. But what I'm denying is that, hold on here a second. This process itself has to align so that the people coming to me for help are going to be able to generate that same type of change for them." Based on their personality type and that dog. So that's the real issue here.
And that's the value of the method, because you can be totally on board with leadership, but then there's no way to audit, right? Mm-hmm. So you can believe in all the talking points that Dale McCluskey puts out, but eventually the rubber hits the road, and you need a method, you need a tool, you need a system to be able to audit, to be able to say, okay, where are we at here?
Exactly.
We're making progress with motivating agents. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've felt. There's such tremendous benefit. And again, that's why Hildegard and I will work with the method, doing 20, 30-minute walks, good sized walks, not crazy, but then there's also time where I allow Hildegard, within my purview, we're doing things together. Hildegard doesn't really do a whole lot on her own. She's laying out in the yard in the sun right now on her own. Mm-hmm. But she's basically waiting for me to, what are we doing?
Yeah.
She's waiting, right? So we're together still. Yeah. She has free will, right? I mean, she's out there. She can walk around the pool and do whatever she wants, right? So it's this it's this kind of balance, right? I mean, I'm still working through relationship issues with Hildegard, so I still have to really be very intentful and interactive with her. But
Mhm.
I hope as this moves on, like you've mentioned in past videos, and to me personally, is that a lot of this stuff kind of fades out. You know, you can do a check-in with Hildegard just to do it. You pretty much know you don't have a problem with Hildegard,
Yeah,
but just
it,
do it. Just
it's
check in.
about yeah, it's about establishing. And I talk about free will and free will and choices, right? It's about context, right? It's understanding that
Right.
it's like the free will of a selfish child. It's like then that's a again you hear that a lot on social media, like this issue about free will is being brought up. And in fact, I've scheduled a video coming out, which I guess people love my videos, right? But Zach George talking about free will, and he's bringing up this thing about consent. The dogs have consent. So ridiculous, but in a way, it's like saying about this goes into the heart of this issue about dogs as in terms of nature,
Right.
strength and weakness defined through the relationship. So yeah, the free will issue. It understands that you're the pivot point. Dogs are pack animals. So yeah, Hildegard's outside, but she's still connected the right way through
Right.
you.
She's
And
looking.
so
She's
yeah,
looking at me, not looking at me nonstop. Like,
yeah,
hey, I
I'm
own you,
scared. Yeah,
pet me.
yeah, or that.
She's
Yeah,
right. She's doing her own thing, but
yeah,
she's always checking in.
yeah.
What's going on?
Hmm.
But so to me, it's also she's very de-stressed. She's laying out in the sun in the same spot she always lays in. She's not rummaging around in the yard, trying to chase squirrels, trying to dig, trying to this, trying to that. To me, those are signs of frustration in a dog. If a dog's out digging around, chewing on stuff, scratching itself, chewing on itself,
Hmm.
constantly moving around. I mean, if that was a child, a human child doing that, people would be real tuned in that something's not right.
Yeah,
That kid's constantly scratching itself. It's
yeah,
constantly chewing on its nails.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what's
yeah.
going on here? We'd
Mhm.
immediately recognize that that's stress,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Something,
Yeah.
something's off. But somehow with the dogs, we echo, oh, well, dogs just dig. No, dogs don't dig nonstop. The
No, no,
dogs,
it's
dogs don't
not.
eat wood and eat wood and chew on stuff nonstop.
Well,
They're not.
that gets into this whole thing about what context, like what is normal, right? What's normal, what's not. It was like but the foundation to know what is or isn't comes through the right connection, comes
Yeah,
through being able to establish the relationship the right way to be able to define that. And so the problem is people can't define it and this is the same problem when they're trying to label abuse on certain responses of dogs. They're not. I said it's the dog training world based on what they come into agreement with is superficial. It's all appearance based. It's all working within superficial response. They can't even reconcile the reactions of dogs properly by way of the relationship. And that's one of the big themes I talk about. This is why you get all these. This is why all these trainers pile on to certain, like the Jeff Gelman situation is a great example. I keep bringing it up, but you saw balanced dog trainers jump on board trying to cancel Gelman. And like I said with Gelman, I never labeled that as abuse. I labeled it as confusion. The dog was startled. I went through the whole video about talking through that.
absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Yeah, it
Yeah, I mean,
started.
I
I mean, because
watched it.
it came from a third party. He's the one that threw the towel, and the lady had the connected to the leash. But I went through about how what should have happened, right, to make for that to make sense to the dog, with influence and control still being part of the equation to intercept. See, that's why I get into talk about an express state of mind with a dog. Once a relationship problem is underway, then that whole thing with control manifesting an express state and the role of influence to intercept that, right? But
Right.
in a proactive way, like in a way you're not waiting for the dog to control to manifest at a high level, because then the dog's going to be more agreeable and the dog
Right.
understands its intent. And you're not saying you can never look at another dog. Like even you
Right.
said there,
That's
like Hildegard's walking right in, like there's now you get a sense of what's like kind of normal looking. Like it's not just
right.
about
Absolutely.
investing that way. It's like okay, but
Right.
but as you know though, once you're in the middle of a relationship problem, those looks aren't normal. They're a high level of control manifesting, investing, and so you have to engage that stinking thinking, as I call it. You got to engage it
Absolutely.
for a period of time. And this is the thing that's why I get like guys like Mark DeBose. This is why I have problems with guys on social media because they're conflating everything. They're not even they're not even taking a moment and defining it properly. They're taking everything out of context.
Right.
And so when I talk about a process at the point, because as you know, when people watch my videos, people have to understand the part of the where things look the worst, okay, or more tyrannical with how I have structure what I'm doing is that worst part of the relationship. And but it'd be the same thing as a parent engaged in the worst part of a relationship with a selfish child that's out of control. It's going to look, even though it doesn't, but it's going to look a little bit more intense. You know,
Right.
but things move on, like move forward. And see, these trainers, they don't want to talk about that way. They don't want to put things in the proper context, even a process, because it goes against their agenda. They're not in it to explain things properly, even to look at. They're in it to try to elevate themselves, elevate their own agenda. And so that's why I have all these trainers out there coming off sounding ridiculous. So
Yeah.
on that note, we're going to segue into.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a video here because I want to talk through some of this absolute craziness going on in the dog training world.
Yeah. Never a dull moment.
Yeah, and Christian, I guess you've been on some of these videos. You've been responding to some of it, and I guess before I get into this, what's your take on what's happening right now on social media with all the foolishness, all the trainers?
Well, to me, it's just like marketing. It's just people attention seeking, and pretty juvenile. And I don't even think it's going to be that effective on social media, truthfully. But that's just me. I think people are looking for authenticity, and there's really nothing authentic about a lot of that criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely wish that some of these individuals, and certainly some of the more popular dog trainers online, because I interact with just dozens of dog trainer accounts. I don't know who they are or anything. I just watch the video and respond, and occasionally people respond back.
Yeah, sure.
I genuinely wish that these trainers would engage, but I also equally understand that they're running businesses. I ran restaurants. The optics are important. And that's kind of the way I view it. The word superficial is perfect, not to overuse it, but I mean, that's really kind of to me what's going on. I mean, if you think about operative conditioning and some of these Skinner kind of concepts, these are all to do mass manipulation. I mean, that's basically how they were applied in the 1950s. There's a great BBC series. I haven't seen it for years. It was like in the early 2000s. I forget the title, but it goes into a lot of this kind of social engineering. And mostly the outcomes are that there's stress and anxiety, at least with humans. A good example is kind of like we all get paid every 2 weeks and we do what we're told, right? Well, what if you don't pay every 2 weeks? Does the employee still do everything they're told? What kind of relationship do you have with that employee? What if your business is in trouble and you need them to wait a little bit? Does the relationship change? Are they no longer in the same role? Now they're in a different role? So I think that this conditioning thing is a very slippery slope. And I think it has a place possibly in the training part, the motivating training, work, learning, the dog's learning how to do tricks or work acts, things like work. But I really think that
well, it has to align for the perception of the dog. The focus has to align properly first. Like when I do the service dog training, it's probably a really good example of where everything fits. You know what I'm saying? So the first part is getting the relationship fixed properly first.
Right.
Then you talk about tricks, and then you do whatever you want.
Right.
I mean,
and that's the point. I think that's what people sometimes miss on your channel, because you take in so many aggressive, problematic dogs. I mean, you tell me, but have you had people come to you, Dale, and be like, "I just want my dog to retrieve this"? Everything else is fine. Dale, just teach my poodle how to retrieve this.
Yeah, no, it's like it's the worst. And that's the thing. It's like I'm not, people are finding me for a reason, right? And so I'm going into and it's hard. And I said this before. I talk about seasons, right? I might start off police canine, and I got fulfillment through like the track. I get to do so many fantastic things with Ruben, so much enjoyment, and got to see him at what he could do and our relationship. So I got so much fulfillment there. But as a new trainer, we had this discussion. Just going in like I'm doing right now, like at the worst part of the relationships, like over and over again, right? That's a hard thing. The way because I'm like, hey, you need to get out and start to get that fulfillment because that's what keeps you going, right? That's what
Yeah.
motivates you because my thing it is an intervention. So but these other trainers are out there superficial. Yeah, they're getting enjoyment all the wrong way, but the dogs aren't getting fixed either. So
Sure.
my thing is I'm doing it the right way, and it is a hard thing
Yeah.
because it's an intervention and with these dogs, but I still get enjoyment by way of seeing other people. Like I know like where things are going. I know being
Right.
successful the right way and all those things. But you're right. It's like people are looking at my videos and they're looking at how I'm defining a process at an
Right.
intervention point. But like I said, I understand the dynamics here. I understand that what needs to happen for things to happen on the other side, things with the dog owner wants to, it's like you have to understand the relationship dynamics of this stuff to understand the
Right.
reason behind it. It's like it's not just like saying, "Oh, I'm engaging this way because I don't like dogs." Like that's really
It's silly.
so cheap.
It's just silly. I mean, what would be the motivation? I mean, I just
Yeah, I
nonsense.
mean, but that's where we're at. Yeah, it's like
Right.
people don't. It's the same thing. Hey, if you're a parent and you got a kid that's out of control, you're gonna engage the relationship because you love your child.
Right.
Not the opposite. I look at it quite differently. If you're a permissive a parent and you're not doing, then that's abuse in my mind because
100%
you're
agree.
yeah you're a role and then you're gonna blame everyone else at the end anyway. So that's what's really going on in the dog training world. This I call it displaced blame, where these trainers are getting away with this only because of the relationship dynamics involved. This is the only reason that these trainers are even able to say the things they do, get away with it. And so what I'm doing is I'm exposing the sham. Okay, this is why these trainers don't like what I'm
Yeah.
saying because I'm telling a dirty secret these trainers aren't going to talk about. But again, I tell people if you're a dog owner and you really care about your dog, pay attention.
Yeah.
Because
Well, and everybody wants to go right to the fun stuff.
oh, of
Right.
course.
Right. I mean, I'm very interested in a lot of these gun dog channels because
Mhm.
I like doing some bird hunting. So I'm very interested in that work. And,
Mhm.
but I do like how many of those trainers will acknowledge that if you have a house dog that's a gun dog and you're babying the dog in the dog's running amok in the house, and then try to come out and do some training for gun dog work, doesn't work.
No,
And
no.
and these trainers will acknowledge that. I mean, they don't have a method, although they're using a slip lead every time. I've never seen a hunting dog trainer without a slip lead,
Yeah.
but often they're smaller dogs. You have smaller, pointers and things, but the principle of the slip lead is, similar, but they run into problems, and then with dogs that have behavioral issues because they're house dogs and gun dogs,
Mhm.
and then the solution is often they take the dog for months. I mean, like a long time,
Well, they go, and I say about that the
right?
stopping point is that yeah, if I'm taking a dog for a dog owner, like and I talk about some of my videos, like for a board and train, the stopping point needs to be at a point where the spotlight goes back to that owner,
Right,
in a timely manner. Like I stop it at the 2 weeks, as you know, for a reason. Because if you go
right,
longer than that, then it's about me. That
right,
dog's changing for me. That dog has to change for them. That dog, that's the originator of the relationship. That's the owner. So you have to know where that intersect point is because, it's not meant to be a be all and end all. I use the board and trains to help take pressure off the dog owner if we're dealing with an aggressive dog. But I'm very careful with that, and I'm doing the right method on top of that.
yeah.
So you can imagine these trainers going like, yeah, a
Well,
month or 2 months, and then they ask the question, well, what's that about? You know what I'm
right, and
saying?
a lot of these gun dog trainers, they don't. Most of them, the ones that I've witnessed, don't have the answers for problematic gun dogs. They really
No.
don't.
Well, here's the
I
story
mean,
for you.
you
Yeah,
have
here's
that
the,
one of the politicians in Christie. What's her name? She's one of the appointed people, and now, I mean, she was on a farm and they put a gun dog down. She wrote about it in her book.
okay.
Everyone got up in arms,
Yeah.
but they're up in arms for the wrong reason, right?
Well, yeah.
They should be up in arms because there are answers that could have helped that dog,
Yeah.
but they're being suppressed.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
there's
yeah.
where we're at.
I had a situation over in the UK with a gun dog trainer. He's since passed away, but the situation was helping. I started helping a gentleman. I'm not going to name names here, but it's a good example with his gun dog, and he was having a problem with his gun dog, and was doing doing the Skype consult. And but I told him like he right away. I said, "Here's the problem. This is how you need to fix it." The focus shifted to him, right? But he could see it, but he bottomed out at a certain point where then he took this dog to this gun dog trainer. Same guy slamming me at the time all over social media. He was like on a rampage, and I'm putting up like crazy videos, like outright lying and stuff, and then so he went over to him, and you're right. He took the dog for like 2 months. I warned the guy. I said, "Listen, this is about you and the dog here,
Right.
and the method here you're going over to. He might get to a certain point of that dog. But that dog has to go back." Sure enough, the whole thing. I kind of checked in on it. I didn't like he kind of separated from me, but I went in that whole situation. That whole situation bottomed out.
Yeah.
Because when the dog went back,
it didn't surprise me. I mean,
you could never get that dog because see, people don't want to listen. It's like, hey, I want what I want, and I'm going to do it this way. And I was like, well, I told you so. I'm not trying to be smart, but I didn't go. But it's just like you have to let people go. They're going to do their thing or whatever. But understand the dynamics of that. You can't. If I take a dog, you have to be aware of what that means in terms of that dog's go back to that owner. So you have to be involved.
Well, and even having the dog for 4 months, I mean, outside of kenneling, that might be the most useful part of a 4-month training is that you're isolating the dog from, teaching it some, impulse control in the sense that it's only interacting with anything through the handler, because most of the time it's in the kennel, then it comes through the handler, and then they do some training or whatever. So that in itself is going to help the dog line up better. But for God's sakes, it's 4 months. I mean, or 2 months or a month even. I mean, so I guess my point is that there's a lot of confusion and a lot of apprehension to lean into some of these ideas that are perceived incorrectly. They're perceived as over the top or abusive. And it just, to me, I don't really get it because I love my dog and I respect her and I want a deep bond with her, and that was my goal, and I'm achieving that. And it's through, and to me, it's through a method that you've developed that is very it's approachable and it's doable. Like it's clear, right?
Yeah.
It isn't like I have to become an expert in reading the dog's body language, and I have to have incredible hand-eye coordination to be able to correct the dog right exactly at the right time. Or I have to create the right environment every time for the dog so that there won't be any distractions. And in that environment, we can then learn stuff. And it's just insane. Yeah. I mean, if you think about look at nature. I mean, nature is complicated, but on the surface, it's really very clear how things operate. Right. So to me, the method has just really helped me have a roadmap and a tool to fall back on. Because if you remember early on when I was working through the method, I'd reach out to you and be like, man, I feel like, we're 5 steps forward and then 2 steps back.
Yeah.
And well, how did I know we were 2 steps back? Well, because I'm using the method. Right.
Well, that gives you a context, right? I say, well, you're getting the right information. Well, how do you even get that if the integrity of what you're doing isn't aligned properly? So it's like influence and control. I talk about that, but that's how you can be able to reconcile, the current state of the relationship, and that's the thing about getting the right information. How's that achieved? It's like your litmus test. So that has to come together. It's the right. I talk about like a personal conversation. The same example I use with the parenting example, right? How's the bad attitude of a child revealed? It's when the parent is putting a certain demand on the child, typically, like, hey, pick up your toys, not for $100, but because it's a demand. Hey, the parental influence, pick them up because I'm the parent. Not saying that like that, but that certain expectation, demand is put on that child. And for a child that has a bad attitude, guess what? It's usually gonna come out at that time.
Right.
And so it's the same thing when I talk about influence and control. a demand, right? And get into the thing about intent, right? And even about the relationship being the motivator, right? That based on connection. It's like with those core ingredients when they're aligned properly and the right language of the methods being spoken, you're going to get the right information, and
That's right.
you'll know because at all points too, when you know the relationship's getting better as well. You
Yeah,
know,
right. And that's where I'm at now is that, I'm really it's starting to really really shine through. Right. And for example, I mean, with Hildegard, I mean, I don't even, again, it's kind of like the method is the language. And you've said that before. The dogs don't speak English. They can't comprehend language, presumably.
mhm.
Right. So how do you communicate with the dog if it's not physical? At least at some level initially. But like now, my relationship with Hildegard, I mean, I just have to look at her place. No,
Mhm.
no words, no hand signals.
Mhm.
I just look with my eyes a couple times at her place,
Mhm.
and she goes to her place. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I want you to go to your place. I'm using my eyes,
Mhm.
but but that's not something that you can achieve like right out of the box. When I
No.
first got Hildegard, I put a little slip lead on her, a little nylon slip lead, and she went into an alligator roll. Just a little pup, full on
Yeah.
alligator roll, just full
Yeah.
on. Whoa! I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
worked through that. I mean, she's just a pup, so it's easy to work through those things. But little did I know that was my first sign. I didn't have the information, so I didn't know how significant that reaction was at the time,
Mhm.
right? So I
Mhm.
go through all the loose leash and the letting her, building trust and all these different kinds of ideas that were new to me, and I applied them. But then as we're loose leash walking, she's going to run. Very powerful dog. She's going to go ahead and like run off the leash and go bite another dog. I mean, what's going on? I
Well,
mean,
there,
I thought
there,
I'm meeting all her needs.
there,
She's able to walk around and do whatever she wants. She
see,
can mark 50 times
yeah.
on a walk wherever she wants to mark.
But see, that's a good example of what you talk about the loose leash method or loose
Right.
leash, like the starting point. And so, when you describe of her going in an alligator roll, right?
Yeah.
Because you had intentional control over her, right? That exposed, it's like that demand thing. So certain things will reveal, but then you get in this thing about free will and choice and loose leash and all this stuff. People they get blindsided, right?
Right.
Because they don't understand, the context of things. Like, it's about relationship,
Right.
and so much of the dog training world is just based on appearances without context, and that's the whole framework from even the starting point is
Right.
trainers that are using treats and they're using motivating agents and they're assuming that things are lining up, and typically
Right.
they're not, right? Because
Especially when it's a young pup.
yeah,
I mean, we just watched Dan had that thing about
oh, yeah.
neutral
Neutral reinforcement, yeah.
neutral reverse, and he shoots a video of a little dog, a little puppy following him around. I mean, unbelievably ridiculous.
Well, speaking of Dan, let's bring up Dan the man, as I call him here, and I'm gonna show. Here he is. Here, let me know
If
when you
I
can.
could have shown the same thing with my pup Hildegard, and then 4 or 5 months later, I could show Hildegard attacking another dog,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And me not being able to control her in any way, right? So
yeah,
I just
exactly.
don't. I'm a little baffled by thinking that means much. It's very
Yeah.
easy to bond with puppies.
Oh, so here's Dan the man. Can you see him?
I don't know if I can see Dan.
Well,
Uh,
that might be
that's okay.
might be doing you a favor if you can't. But
Let me.
I have him up on the share. Shiz is sharing here, so let me play Dan the man. Like this is him celebrating the fact that I've went away off YouTube for like 30 seconds. So let me play this.
See if I can pull it up here. Is it showing Dan?
I just stopped the share. I don't know if you.
I didn't get to see it. Did it play?
Yeah, I was playing there for a second. I just stopped it. But basically, I don't know if it'll come through for later on the recording, but still going off here. So, yeah, I tried the sharing thing. We'll try it again here in a minute. Let me know. Let me try to bring this up again. I don't know why it didn't. He says in Rumble here.
Some
We're
of
trying
the
this.
learning how to work through Rumble stuff here. Yeah.
Oh, let me do it again here. Okay, I got it up. Let me know if you can see it. I was playing it for like a minute. Did you hear any of the audio
Yeah, I
from it?
could hear the audio, but
Couldn't see the video. Well, that's okay, I guess, if you can't. But basically, well, it was him celebrating, clapping. Hey, Dale McCluskey has left YouTube, and but all the point, you see, and I talked about how these characters are on social media creating like multiple fake accounts. I had to stop. In fact, what happened was I had to turn off the comments. They're still off. I'll probably turn them back on again.
yeah,
But there's so much of that crazy that's going on, and he celebrated because I went over to you. And the only reason I went over to took the videos down, now they're all back up because part of my thing was because of the just the way the dog training world is right now with the Ivan Belanoff situation is a good example. The copyright strike that I got on my channel from under fair usage. I brought that whole incident up to by way of Miracle Canine. I commented on one of the videos, but problem I had is okay. Hold on here a second. I get 3 strikes and my channel gets like terminated, and I have a lot of content on there beyond just the flipping the script series. A lot of instructional videos.
oh yeah, you have a
Yeah,
lot.
I didn't want to jeopardize that happening because that's where we're at. These trainers, they're not going to talk about the real. They're not talking about the real issue. They don't care about talking about the real issue. The question that I put up on my Facebook page, you can see it right up there on my Facebook business page, is what's the criteria? There's a whole foundation of everything. How are they establishing that the perception of these dogs are changing the way they think they are within the framework of superficial response? That's a basic question. Like they
Yeah,
should be able to answer that, right? They can't for a reason. And then add to that all the collateral damage, all these dogs, being blamed. And so there's the heart of the matter right there. And these trainers won't respond to it, yet they trash talk all day long. They're trying to, that's what they do. Copyright strike me, right? And so for me, going to Rumble's more of a free speech platform. I love Rumble. In fact,
yeah, me too.
yesterday my view count went up 500% in one day on Rumble.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I mean, and I
Very
said
cool.
this all along that I felt I was being throttled back and shadow banned. And I had an incident happen on YouTube that kind of gave me a glimpse of that months ago, where I was put a video and the video went like viral for like an hour, and I had like 1,500 subscribers. I could see them, and then within 2 hours it dropped off by hundreds, all within like a minute. And so
Huh.
I'm like, okay, like that's a little too suspicious, right? Why is that
Yeah,
happening? It's okay now. That's YouTube. I mean, that's just how it is. So
yeah,
for me, but you have all these fake accounts. You have these trainers on their fake accounts,
yeah. It's like
marketing.
spamming. It's like
Yeah,
spamming,
yeah,
or right. It's like botting with
yeah,
a human bot.
yeah. But
Um,
marketing all this garbage, and they're fine. YouTube doesn't. You know what I'm saying? So if you're
yeah,
talking about what the real issue is, they'll get rid of you. So, but my whole
yeah,
thing. So again, the only reason I went over to Rumble with that stuff turned out because of the fear of losing my channel. But now, guess what? I have it all backed up. So I found
right. Did some
a way to
work,
do
got it all backed
got
up.
it all
Good.
backed up. So all my videos, just so people can we can have another round of applause here from Canine
Yeah.
Society.
Well,
All
I
my
would say
videos are backed up.
I would say I have my own challenge for Dan,
Mhm.
right? And my similar to your Facebook challenge, but maybe a little bit different. But my challenge to Dan would be, and on video, Dan, like Dale has done hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Um, Show us how you work with an aggressive dog from day one. Like show the people
Mhm.
dropping the dog off,
Mhm.
an aggressive dog, and show us how you put a muzzle on it, how you crate train it, how you deal with food issues. Show us how you teach the dog. Okay, I'll use that word. I'll make a concession and I'll say that you're going to teach the dog and the dog will learn. That's fine. If that's what you believe, I don't believe that. I believe it's about relationship. I believe something deeper is going on. But if Dan believes that he's got some kind of insight, let's set aside 99% of the dogs Find that 1% dog. Find that high drive, aggressive dog that has issues. I encourage anybody on Rumble to reach out to Dan and YouTube, to reach out to Dan and offer up their problematic dog. Mm-hmm. And I'm almost willing to pay for it. I mean, like just to see it. I mean, Dan, let's go. I mean, let's take on this, and I'm talking a real dog, a dog that's at least 1.5 years old, let's say, right? Not a puppy, not like the neutral work he was doing. Let's get into a serious dog. The dogs that I've handled, the dogs I've seen Dale handle, not only in person but online numerous times, right? Very specific, no editing, no high quality, video editing, no cameraman, no bells and whistles, right? Just the work, just show the work in a real simple form, just like Dale does. Dale has a tripod and a GoPro. If you want to upgrade from that, that's fine, but let's see you work with the real dog. That's what I want to see. Maybe you have. Prove me wrong.
Well, it's not going to probably happen because he's like the professor. The professor has showed up on. I say that because it's true. It's like went on. And anyone that encountered who the professor guy is, now all his videos are gone. But same thing. These characters show up on social media, and that's the problem. They can take a hold of this ready-made idea of things. And they're like lunatics, and and all the fake accounts, all the craziness, but it's a sign. It's just symptomatic of what the dog training world has become over time. Because again, I say if the truth is subjective, like anything goes. Yep. And so anything goes in the dog training world because that's where we're at. And so all these problems happening, I tell people they're not some sort of random accident.
No. But I don't want to see movie dog training. Yeah. I don't need to see any of the bells and whistles from any of these trainers. Just please, any one of you guys that disagree with this premise and this method, please. I mean this genuinely. Just put out some content that is in the same lane, if you will, as what Dale's doing, just so we can do apples to apples, right? Like, let's see what you're doing. Let's stop with all the cuddling with the dog on the couch and all this kind of nonsense. Very entertaining, but let's get down to the nitty gritty here. Let's show what you're doing. Now, I would assume the biggest comeback's going to be, well, this is I have to make a living. I can't just give away all my information, and I have to, this is coveted, so I can, generate income, and I can sympathize with that. But I mean, Dale's putting his work out there. I mean, I'm sure Dale likes money just like everyone else. What's going on? Let's
absolutely. Go. Yeah. So I popped up another, I don't know if you can see this, Robert Hines, but I popped up another video here of him. Now I'm just going to play part of this. This is his latest video and, about suing your dog trainers. Okay, so I'm just going to play just a part of this here.
See if I can see it on another.
So we'll stop that. So I don't know if you were able to hear that, Christian, but
yeah, I didn't. I went on my iPad here and tried to watch it just on Rumble on a kind of a side source here, but I can't see it. I couldn't get through the commercials quick enough.
So, that's okay. Like I said, hopefully maybe it came up for people to see. But basically, here you got guys out there like Robert Hines saying, I put a video scheduled to come out here, me properly responding to what he's saying. But I'm saying absolutely sue your dog trainers, but sue Robert Hines while you're at it. I mean, he's, he tries to act like he's somehow separate and apart from, everything that's happened in the dog training world. He's part of the problem.
Well, it just falls into the operative conditioning to me. I mean, just anxiety, shame-based cultures are the ones that really glam onto this operative conditioning. I mean, this fits right in. And I feel like that's kind of what he's doing. He's trying to shame everybody, right? But gaslighting is kind of the term that we use now in some ways also kind of being manipulative. I think the whole premise of this system of conditioning this way is very much about control.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it works with humans because we can work it through. We can work through it. Our intellect can work through it. But these animals, I'm not sure they have the mental capacity to work through the manipulation. And I think that's partly why you see dogs acting out and people getting blindsided. But with this whole lawyer thing, to me, that plays into this. That's just, again, that's threatening. That's
Mm-hmm.
like that's using a form of aggression or threats to get an outcome, right?
Yeah.
So I've never seen you correct a dog, really, Dale. I try to think about it, like when have I said no to Hildegard? When have I corrected her? Like never. I don't think I've ever said no to my dog because I don't have to say no. If she's doing something that I don't like, I just get in her airspace with my body. I just walk over to her, and guess what? She knows I don't like what she's doing, and
Yeah.
she daddles away. She
Yeah.
moves out of my space. I claim what I don't want her doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I think Kevin is tuned in, right? He knows that. He knows that he can use his claiming and his body.
Yeah, he's dialed into a lot of that, the social aspect
Right.
of it, and
So when I
so
see this lawyer stuff, to me, it's just more of the same. It's
it's
just more of this using aggression and using it's passive aggression because it's a permissive
yeah.
thing. So it's the worst kind of aggression, some would say. I don't know if
Well,
I agree with that, but it's passive, but it's
it,
aggression.
it's it's language too. I mean, because here's the thing: if the Zach George, where I label, I use the example that Robert Hunt's just like Zach George by the way how he uses language. Because if I label someone as toxic or as a dog abuser, it means I don't have to deal with you.
That's right.
I can shut you. If people buy into that label,
Right.
I don't have to talk to you anything. I
It's
don't
just
have to confront the real problem. I can just shut you down. And
right.
so many people are doing that now, right? Social media, it's all about that type of. It's a type of power play.
Well, yeah,
You
Zach's
know?
just conditioning his audience.
Yeah, yeah. That's
He's
all.
using a negative
Yeah,
language to condition his audience, right? I mean, this is the Skinner kind of concept.
it is. Yeah.
But I would say it's superficial because even though they might all be agreeing with Zach, the ones that have dogs that it's not working out,
Mm-hmm.
that superficial, toxic, all that language, that has no bearing on the relationship that his followers may have that have problems, right? Like meaning like if Zach has a follower, but they're not getting results, at some point, whether that person realizes it or not, they were following something that doesn't work, right? I mean, like it's just conditioning. He's just conditioning people, but the truth will come to the surface with dogs.